Now, I say that because you'll remember maybe two or three times along the way here, I have reminded you that in the history of New Testament scholarship, uh, there have been eras and epochs. And when the New Testament scholarship sort of started being a science, when it went from a mainly allegorical way of reading Bible over to we're going to read it as people are doing literature and history. We're going to do literature and history with the Bible. The first thing that they started to ask was about sources. Some of you know that the the theory of the Pentateuch, Wellhausen's theory of the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Bible, was that it was made up of four different sources that were woven together in between it, and that shook the Bible reading world. Similar things were done with New Testament, and so sussing out sources was a big deal. But when they got through to that, they then would sometimes characterize the authors as mere collectors. That is, in this case, they would parse out the different sources within the Sermon on the Mount. They would see it as a compilation. They would say, this is from this source, this is from that source. And they wouldn't look for logic in the order, because it was more like, in the famous image, putting pearls on a string, right? They would just find the gospel authors were just finding great sayings of Jesus and putting them on a string indiscriminately. They didn't have an order that mattered. But as we've seen in the sermon, Jesus seems to have beginning, middle, and end things in mind. And so, if this started with judgment, this section, and it was, by the way, mirroring a section from chapter 6, which is clever. If it started with judgment and went then to how far judgment can go with the sort of, if you self-examine, you might be able to judge. Then it went on to assess how you give gospel or give time. Now it should have something to do with all of that. When we get to ask and it will be given to you, search and you will find, knock and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks received, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks the door will be opened. Right? That's the exhortation. Ask because it's going to work. Right? But what we ask for is kind of the question. Is this just general prayer? Ask, seek, find in a sort of general way. That's usually how it's taken. In other words, it's usually taken as if it's a pearl on the string, as if it's just another great thing Jesus said that may not have anything to do with what just happened. But there came an era in New Testament scholarship where they said, well, these authors seem a little smarter than we gave them credit for being, because look at this and that, and they fit together. And look, Mark 1 and Mark 3 have ironies that break out in them, and you wouldn't have the irony without their being placed next to each other. So scholarship moved, and the trends in scholarship moved to what was called redaction criticism. And that was that the gatherers had more design than they'd been given credit for by the former source critics. So we got that far. Then in the late 20th century, there came a movement of narrative criticism in which people started to look at a gospel as something that was kind of ordered as other literature would be ordered, with a connectedness that was, if not seamless, at least orderly. And in that case, those readers, those late 20th century and beyond readers, would say the things we've just heard ought to matter for our interpretation of what we're about to read. And so ask, seek, and knock probably have as their context, at least, and probably have as their intent, ask for the kind of wisdom that allows you to know how to spend your gospel, how to spend your time, how to make these discernments that we've been talking about over the first parts of this section, right? How do I make those? Well, Solomon got a lot of credit for, he was given one wish by God. Right? In the famous passage, he was given one wish. He said, it almost like Aladdin's lamp, right? But he gets one. And what did he ask for? He asked for wisdom. He said, I am a young man and I know nothing. I need wisdom, and he got huge commendation from God for asking for that. Here we have, I think, implicitly another run at that. Because if I come away from the log in the eye and the splinter in the eye, and then I come away from the dogs and pearls, and I'm feeling like, how am I going to make these decisions? Jesus says, I got you. I got you. Ask, seek, knock. If you ask for wisdom, you'll be following the Solomon path.